When somebody asks me,
what's your favorite
spooky video game?
You might think of any of the Resident Evils, maybe Outlast, or insert your favorite indie title here, all of which are great choices. But among my personal top 5 is one made by Nintendo of all people. But not because it's what you'd think of when you think of a traditional horror game. And I can hear it now. Meaty, are you huffing paint thinner again?
Oh god. Oh my god.
Nintendo doesn't make horror games, which for the most part you'd be correct. But hear me out. There's one that they've made that fills me with that spooky season spirit whenever I go back and replay it, due to the wonderfully unique atmosphere that it has, and that title is Luigi's Mansion. With spooky season right around the corner, I, like many others, enjoy playing a nice horror game to get in the mood, and when I think of fall, I remember the holy trinity of soup, cider, and Luigi's Mansion. So naturally, what better way to get a jump on the festivities than to take a look at one of the most fun and unique horror games that Nintendo has ever made. Also, while you're here, consider hitting that spooky subscribe button to support what I do here. Self-promotion over, let's get into it. I'll be taking a look at the development history, general gameplay and plot elements, some cut content and other behind-the-scenes trivia, and hell, maybe I'll even throw in some creepypasta-style gaming urban legends surrounding the game. So if that's something that you're interested in, stay tuned while we talk about the strange gem of a game that is Luigi's Mansion. Let's begin our haunted tale at the beginning with Nintendo Space World 2000, where we're shown a lot of these full motion videos when the game was little more than an idea. These were mainly used as a tech demo to show off the graphical capabilities of the upcoming Nintendo GameCube. However, shortly after, Nintendo decided to make those ideas into a full-fledged game, and production started soon after. The game was worked on by some of the biggest names at Nintendo, including Hideki Kono, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Takashi Tezuka, and the soundtrack was composed by Kazumi Totaka, who has worked on some of Nintendo's other biggest franchises. And might I say, Luigi's Mansion is in the running for one of my favorite and one of the most unique sounding Mario soundtracks ever, and that's a very difficult list because Mario just has some great music across the board. Prior to this though, the game wasn't about Linguini or his moderately sized house, and it wasn't even intended to be released for the GameCube. The game originally began its life on the Nintendo 64, but it couldn't handle the raw power of Luigi and what the devs envisioned for the game, so it was eventually transitioned to the GameCube. Since the GameCube was developed alongside the game due to it being a launch title for the console, many features of the controller and other aspects of the console were actually designed with that game in mind. More on that later though. The idea for the game originally was to simply explore a big house or apartment, later on a ninja house, and finally settling on a European-style mansion, with the camera angling being based on the idea of a dollhouse, peering in each of the rooms through the side. After they got the setting down, the next big focus in development was the lighting, where I assume one of the devs accidentally pulled the saturation slider down to spooky, and thus the idea of the mansion being haunted was born. And they put a lot of work into the lighting here. One of the biggest draws was the game being able to project real-time shadows on every object in the game, and the lighting being nearly perfect here really does wonder for the atmosphere of the game. It gives the mansion a spooky feel and makes the first one the most standout game in the series in my opinion. Now that all the initial planning was done, all we needed was a character to play as, and since they wanted to do things differently this console generation, and Mario was too brave of a boy, they landed on his shy, scared brother Luigi being the main character. This is actually where a lot of Luigi's modern day personality was really fleshed out rather than just being a Mario palette swap. I think a lot of this is owed to Charles Martinet's fantastic voice acting. Prior to this, he had done some booths where he voiced Luigi and portrayed him as being more of a shy character, which I'll play that clip now. But this is where his personality really gets put on display.
Can we please speak to your brother Luigi? And I say, oh, sure, I get them for you. Oh, wait a minute, you know something? I just realized, he's pretty shy, and I think he's in his kitchen making spaghetti meatballs. But I'll ask him. Yeah? What do you want? You want to come out and say hello to everybody? No, I'm too shy. Besides, I'm in the kitchen making spaghetti meatballs.
Much of these are more subtle details that you might miss on a first playthrough though. If your health is low, Luigi calls for Mario and will be more panicked, and he'll hum and react to things more nervously. And scanning things with the Game Boy horror will cause Luigi to comment on them, giving us a rare inside look at the inner workings of the mind of the man, the myth, and the legend himself. Fast forward a year later to E3 of 2001, which is now a ghost in itself, ripped to E3, where we finally have a playable demo. However, this was still far from the final build that we got. You can notice a lot of little differences in the pre-release footage between stuff that was changed in the final build and some that was cut entirely. Fun fact, a lot of it was reused in other aspects of the game, and some were used and never shown off, such as this dust counter. The game actually simulates in real time and counts the amount of dust sucked up, which is astonishing because it has no visible impact on the game whatsoever apart from the realism of it. Imagine being the poor programmer who spent 6 months programming the ability to realistically vacuum dust just for nobody to notice. At this time there were actually 2 separate builds for the game, neither of which was the final build, so there was a lot of ideas being tossed around internally for the game. Anyway, enough development history for now, as we'll touch more on the behind the scenes parts of the game later. Let's get into the version of the game that we actually got. In November of 2001, we got Lasagna's Small Condo here in North America as a launch title for the GameCube. And the plot of the game is simple. Luigi wins a mansion in a contest he didn't enter, and upon entering, he's attacked by ghosts who say that they've captured his brother. Then, in the nick of time, he's saved by the resident ghost researching, cleaning supplies / arms dealer of the Mario universe, Professor Egad. They escape to his lab where he explains that the mansion just sort of popped up a few days ago, and that he saw Mario go in and never come back. So he gives you his Proton Pack, the Poltergust 3000, in order to deal with the ghosts, and the Game Boy Horror in order to communicate with you and keep track of everything in the game. And then after a quick ghost hunting tutorial, he sends you off, but not before showing you his prized gallery, where he once had a collection of ghosts from around the world that he turned into paintings. These ghosts were then freed by a giant boo, who then set up the mansion overnight and are now hiding out in there. So he wants you to go recapture the portrait ghosts while you look for Mario. And that's really it for the plot, just a straightforward and simple adventure in Luigi's large townhouse. After that, we head back into the mansion for the true start of the game, and the structure of the game is somewhat Metroidvania in nature. As you go through the mansion, defeating ghosts, finding keys, or getting upgrades, you unlock previously walled off sections of the mansion, or you find tools that are needed to solve puzzles elsewhere in the mansion. There are a handful of secret rooms that require you to find a secret hidden entrance, which challenges your layout of the mansion and how closely you observe your surroundings. Something that I absolutely love. It reminds me a lot of Resident Evil in a lot of ways, something akin to the police station in 2, which is a weird statement to think about, but oddly fitting. And much like Resident Evil, the layout and locations of all of the rooms just make sense and are a joy to explore, solve their puzzles, and find all of the little secrets of, which there are many, often rewarding you with bonus money. The money, along with how well you do at the portrait ghost fights, are used to grade your performance at the end of each section, giving it an arcadey kind of feel, always trying to improve your run and increase your high score. This does mean that the whole game can be beaten in an afternoon, which is one of the big complaints at the time of its release by critics, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It just means that the game doesn't drag on or overstay its welcome. The general gameplay is what I would describe as simple yet complex. As stated earlier, the game was developed alongside the GameCube, and the dev team was able to request specific features for the controller and console, which is actually how we got the dual stick controls, one being envisioned for Luigi's movement and one for his direction. And I know that I've said this in my GameCube video, which if you haven't watched, you can check out here. It's one of my personal favorites that I've done. But to this day, I think that the GameCube controller just feels the best of any controller that I've ever used, and we've got this game to thank for that. It does take a bit of getting used to, but once it clicks, it all just feels right. That extends not only to the movement, but capturing the ghosts too. In order to do so, you have to hit the B button to flashbang with your flashlight, exposing their hearts, and then hold R to suck them up. This drains their life, but in order to do it more quickly, you have to pull in the opposite direction the ghost is moving, making it a bit of a challenge with the faster ghosts. Some have special requirements, such as the mass ghosts requiring the mask to be removed first, the elemental ones requiring a specific element to combat them, and some of the portrait ghosts having environment-specific puzzles. But that's the general gist of it. Picking it up is simple, but mastering it is very nuanced. Another aspect I really like about this game's gameplay is the Game Boy Horror camera, where you can get a nice first-person look at the game in order to really appreciate the work they did on the textures. This also allows you to scan objects and ghosts in the environment. This often gives flavor text in the form of Luigi's opinion on things, or hints on how to beat whichever ghost you're looking at, which I just think is so cool. It's also used for some of the puzzles and secret areas in the game, netting you more money as a payoff for your careful observation of things in the environment. This all really encourages the player to really comb over the environment and incentivizes subsequent playthroughs in order to find stuff that you missed last time. The Game Boy Horror also contains a map of the area, a tracker for any boos hidden in the area, as well as descriptions for all of the portrait ghosts that you've captured, which I really love. It makes the ghosts feel like characters of their own, each having their own little backstory to them and explaining why they're in the rooms that they're in, as a way to add a bit of storytelling on top of the main plot. Speaking of the portrait ghosts, each section of the game is usually capped off by a boss fight with a portrait ghost, where after defeating them, you go back to the lab and convert the ones that you've defeated into paintings, with each having a different frame, either gold, silver, or bronze, and different artwork depending on how well you did at the fight. Ideally, getting the ghost in one clean shot will drop the max amount of pearls for the fight. Skipping ahead a bit to the third section of the game, after defeating Colossus, the mansion will be struck by lightning, causing a blackout, which causes previously cleared rooms to be populated by ghosts once again. This will lead into the final part of the game, and will also subtly change some of the aspects of the mansion, with some rare ghosts such as gold mice and speedy spirits only being available during this time. This section of the game ends with Luigi finding the big bad of the game, none other than King Boo, who is upset at the Mario Brothers for causing him so much trouble in the past. So he set up the mansion and the fake contest in order to lure them there, and then sealed Mario in a portrait, preventing him from meddling in his plans in the future. King Boo escapes into the portrait, which then morphs into Bowser, sucking in Luigi for the final battle of the game. In this fight, King Boo, either wearing a Bowser suit or Bowser's undead body, whichever you choose to believe, breathes fire and throws spike balls at you. You suck up the spike balls and throw them back at him, subsequently blowing his head off, which then flies around, I know it doesn't make any sense, shooting projectiles at you, which is your opportunity to suck up King Boo. Upon defeating him, you exit the portrait and are contacted by Professor Egad, who congratulates you and tells you to bring Mario's portrait back so he can turn him back to normal. You run Mario's portrait through the portrificationizer backwards, and Mario's reverted back to his original form, reunited with Luigi, who is now laugh-crying at his brother. You get this funny, wholesome cutscene, which I'm going to let play out here, and we're graded one final time, where we get a new mansion depending on the rank that we got. The game then ends.
Mamma mia. Oh, oh,
This was a great little title for the GameCube, and launched a series of sequels that followed after, which were all good in their own right, but they didn't quite have the same atmosphere and feeling as this one. The best way I can describe it is a horror game that's had the scares toned down so that almost anyone can appreciate it, even if they aren't a fan of the genre. However, that overall spooky tone is still there, which is why the first one is my favorite of the series. Aesthetically and gameplay-wise, it's among Nintendo's most unique video games, and one that I just find very fun and satisfying to play. The short length that was originally panned by critics actually works in favor of this game, I'd say. It provides a short, concise experience with almost all the fat and padding trimmed out. It has so much under the surface and so many hidden secrets that it just gives it a ton of replayability. Speaking of hidden secrets, you'd think that this is where the video ends, right? Well, not quite. Almost as interesting as what ended up being in the game is the stuff that didn't end up being in the game. So because I enjoy cut content and dumb game creepypastas, I'm going to talk about some of the more creepy bonus content surrounding the game. This includes things that were rumored to be in the game or content that was cut from the game but still exists, haunting the files of the game, so to speak, just as a spooky bonus at the end of the video. So let's start with some of the more famous theories and rumors surrounding the game and go from there. In the third area of the game, when you go to the telephone room during the blackout, there's a part where you answer the phone while lightning flashes, and Luigi's shadow is shown on the wall in a way that looks like he's hanging off the ground. So people speculated that Luigi was dead and that the whole game was some sort of afterlife. What is it with Nintendo fans in the same theory over and over? Like, God, we already got that with Majora's Mask, come up with a new idea. Anyway, that's spooky and all, but in truth it's just a visual glitch where the camera is lower than normal, so shadows are projected above the ground, and it was actually changed in the remake due to them redoing the lighting from the ground up. Another popular rumor at the time was based on an early beta version of the game, where it had this counter at the bottom and people speculated that you had a limited amount of time to save Mario before he was trapped in the mansion forever, and that Luigi would become depressed like in the Space World cutscene if he failed to save him. People thought this trailer was funny at the time, but over the years it became increasingly spooky due to the number of creepypastas it inspired, along with the hanging Luigi rumor. However, this is all just a misinterpretation of early beta concepts. The counter was just used so that players couldn't play the E3 demo for a long time, and the graphic was for an unused bad rank for your final money ranking that was eventually cut along with the beta trailer it was shown in, not having any part of it present in the final game. Finally, no rumors section would be complete without talking about the Hunter Ghost. The Hunter Ghost was a rumored portrait ghost that was mentioned in the October 2001 issue of Nintendo Power magazine, where a promotional blurb states, "When your ghoul-busting mission takes you to the trophy room, proceed with caution. If you meet up with the ghost of a hunter, he'll want to add Luigi to his collection." This was nothing more than an inside joke among magazine publishers, which was actually common at the time just to print misinformation here and there. I assume to keep things interesting or as a copyright detection method. We have modern day renditions as to what the Hunter Ghost may have looked like, but the game has been data mined heavily in recent years and no file for the Hunter Ghost was ever found. However, there were tons of files that were found that go unused in the final game, such as the final thing that I want to talk about, which is this horrifying abomination. ELH.spz, as it's known in the files, was a cut portrait ghost that would have had 3 cores corresponding to the elements that you can find in-game. Assumedly, you'd have to use the different elements to defeat it. Not much else is known about this enemy as it was cut about a month after the E3 demo, but surprisingly it still has some animations tied to it. People also speculate it could have been an early version of Bogmire, but we really can't say for sure. Based on how this one looks, it's probably for the best that it was cut, because let's face it, this is the shit of nightmares. It would have made small children immediately shit their pants and never touch the game again. As this video draws to a close and spooky season approaches, I hope it made you appreciate this short little gem of a game that we got, and maybe you even learned something interesting today. It's a seasonal staple for me that I go back to once a year around this time, and I just really wanted to talk about it. It's among one of the weirder titles that Nintendo has made, but it's got such a unique charm that I'd say it's among one of their best too. Thank you for watching, roll the haunted outro. Hey, thanks for staying until the end of the video. If you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Comments are always welcome as well. What did you think of Luigi's Mansion? Do you have a favorite level, area, maybe even a personal anecdote regarding the game? Let me know down below. This won't be the only horror themed video I do for the season, as I plan on trying to get at least 2 more done before Halloween, but we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, the rest of my content is in the end cards or linked below my socials if you want to check any of that out. If you guys really like my content, consider checking out the Patreon link below, but no pressure. I'm just really glad you watched my dumb video. Thank you once again to NDH for your Patreon support. You allow me to keep making these silly videos and I appreciate that a ton. Thank you all once again for watching this video. I hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you next time.